Let's run 30 seconds. 30 seconds. All right, can you all hear me? Okay, cool. All right, I am Adam Caudill, and this is an introduction to real-world cryptography. We've got a lot to cover today in a relatively short amount of time. This is a somewhat ambitious talk in that I've got 25 minutes to cover a huge amount of information. So I'm going to go kind of quick, and I'm going to do my best not to lose anybody in the process here. So, I'm a independent security researcher and software developer. More than 15 years of experience. Security has been a major focus of mine throughout my entire career. I'm one of the rare people that has a real passion for both development and for security. And all too often there is a gap between those two worlds. So anytime I have the chance, I try to bridge it. I try to bring these two communities together. So today, I hope everybody here is going to walk away with a better understanding of cryptography. This is a very challenging world, but a very rewarding area to study. I also think, I'm hoping that you all end up with a better respect for the care that's needed for dealing with cryptography because of the difficulties that come with it. This talk is about giving you a brief introduction. This doesn't mean that after this talk you'll be able to sit down and write a NSA-proof chat application or, sit down on your laptop and break RSA. What you should be able to do is be able to talk intelligently with other people when the topic turns to cryptography. You should understand enough of the basics to understand what's going on. Hopefully, you will then choose to do more research on your own. There's a couple of resources I'll point to at the end of the talk. We can learn more about the topic. So, the goal here is to impart as much knowledge as I possibly can in 25 minutes. We'll see how it goes. This one is important, and this is something that everybody needs to understand. To talk about cryptography, you have to first talk about what it is and what it isn't. For too many people, cryptography is seen as a magical fairy dust that they can sprinkle onto something that will endue it with security. I think we all know that that's not true. When viewed this way, cryptography often does more harm than it does good. It provides a false sense of security, and it provides a layer of obscurity that makes it hard to understand what a system or a protocol is even doing. Cryptography can be a great and powerful tool when used correctly, when used as part of a system that is properly designed. Proper design, though, is far more challenging than most people realize. There is much that must be understood. Even seemingly simple design properties, if you don't understand how things interact, can end up exposing fatal flaws in a system. Can anyone here guess the most common reason that a crypto system fails? People. Plain and simple. People making mistakes. Almost all of them are simple, avoidable mistakes that occurred because they didn't have a solid understanding of what they were doing. I'm not blaming people that have made these mistakes because they happen. But there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand when you're putting together a system like this. anytime that you're dealing with cryptography, there are interactions that are not obvious, but you have to understand it to make the system work correctly. Almost all of the significant failures over the last several years have been a direct result of somebody making an avoidable mistake. This list covers all of the key topics you need to understand when discussing crypto. So hopefully, pay attention here. You'll walk away with enough understanding of this stuff to, hold up your end of a conversation. So let's talk about encryption. For symmetric or secret key encryption, algorithms fall into two basic types: stream ciphers and block ciphers. Stream ciphers are fairly simple. They're typically very fast. And they're fairly easy to understand. They really aren't that complicated. Generally, a stream cipher is a strong pseudo-random number generator where you use the key as the seed. The output that it generates, which is referred to as the key stream, is XORed with the plain text to generate your ciphertext. It's a very simple operation. So the RNG, the random number generator, creates a key stream that is the same length as the plain text. In function, this is very similar to a one-time pad that was, in some cases, extremely successful during World War II and shortly after, and in other cases failed completely. The problem with a one-time pad is your message can only be the size of the key. And since your key and your message are the same size, it makes it kind of hard to transmit your key. Because if you have a secure means of transmitting the key, well, you can just use that to transmit your message. On the topic of stream ciphers, at one point RC4 was probably the single most popular general-purpose stream cipher in use. And it's a great example today of what happens when an algorithm fails, and how it can cause issues many years after the fact. RC4 happens to be fast. Very, very fast. Because of its speed and its ease of implementation, there was actually a challenge a while back trying to fit an entire RC4 implementation into a single tweet. It actually works. It's a very simple algorithm. Because of this, it became extremely popular, especially in the world of TLS. But while it was becoming popular, flaws were being noticed. And this dates back to 1995. By then, it was already understood that it was flawed. It was known that there were problems with it. Just nobody understood how far they went. In 2001, a major attack was released that allowed the other primary user of RC4, Web, to be easily broken. After the attack in 2001, it was largely considered insignificant by the academic community. It was broken, it was boring now, the academic community moved on to other things. So, for many years, RC4 was basically ignored. There was no real research going on. There were attacks released in 2005 and 2007, but they weren't that significant, and like I said, for the most part, the academic community had just simply moved on and didn't really care anymore. Unfortunately, nobody else was paying attention to this. TLS continued to use RC4, as did all kinds of systems across the world. It was still incredibly popular, despite the fact that it was known to be flawed. In 2011, the Beast attack was announced, which was an attack against CBC mode, as implemented in TLS. The best short-term fix that was available at the time was to stop using AES and transfer all your traffic over to RC4, which is exactly what people did. At this point, most internet traffic was RC4 encrypted. This known flawed algorithm was encrypting everything. The one good thing that came out of this is it put RC4 back on the radar for the academic community. They realized they still needed to look at this one. It wasn't dead yet. From its early days, it was known that there were certain biases in the first few bytes of the key stream. Certain values came up more often than they should. In 2013, the academic community finally finished it. What you're seeing there is actually the pattern of the beginning of the key stream. If that was done correctly, you would just see random. There should be no pattern. There should be no discernible anything. The fact that you're seeing this is a clear indication that there is a clear pattern to what's being generated. The biases that were thought to be only in the first few bytes actually extend throughout the key stream. With enough connections, it's possible for an attacker to recover the key and decrypt and get back to the plain text. In general, in cryptography, it's rare for an algorithm to fail. But when it does, it tends to be catastrophic. RC4 is a great example of that. Block ciphers are in some ways simpler, and in other ways they're actually quite a bit more complex. Where a stream cipher can, at least theoretically, handle a plain text of any size, block ciphers can only encrypt up to their block size. For AES, that's 128 bits, 16 bytes. That's all you can encrypt. So, to make it useful and be able to go beyond that, we introduce block modes, which are a higher level operating mode. They define how blocks are encrypted and how one block affects others around it. The most common block mode is CBC, or cipher block chaining. For the first block, it uses a random IV, or initialization vector. XORs that with the plain text before performing the encrypt operation. For subsequent blocks, it uses the ciphertext of the last block as its IV. This way, every block is different. You don't get patterns in your data. There are many, many different modes that are used. Some are good, some are bad. Who here has seen this image before? Excellent. This is, for those that don't know, what you get when you encrypt a bitmap of tux in ECB mode. ECB mode is basically just the encryption operation performed 16 bytes at a time. Nothing is carried forward, nothing is altered, nothing is changed. ECB mode is actually dangerous in many, if not most, cases. It's something to be avoided if at all possible. What you're seeing here is the amount of structure that is being leaked. For some types of data, the amount of structure can reveal what's actually in there, as you can see here. At one point, sometime back, I was doing some research on Snapchat. As an interesting note, they use a hard-coded key in the application to encrypt their images before they're being sent to the server. Their images are encrypted in ECB mode. When the FTC sued Snapchat for misleading customers about the security of the application, the FTC actually used my research to prove that Snapchat was aware of the problems and when they became aware of it, proving that they had been lying for years. In general, you should never use ECB mode for anything. It's dangerous. Whenever possible, you should be using GCM mode. If your framework of choice doesn't provide GCM, CBC with an HMAC is an acceptable alternative, but not quite as strong. On to public key crypto. We have asymmetric or public key encryption. This is my favorite area to work with because it allows you to do things that, if you stop and think about it, is really quite fascinating. Being able to exchange encrypted messages without revealing a key is a remarkable thing. I can send you something, and nobody else has any ability to see it unless they possess the same private key you do. Modern public key encryption also falls into two basic types, and they are primarily defined by what hard math problem you have to solve to completely shatter them. I love that formula. It is so clean, so simple. The concepts behind RSA were first detailed in classified research in 1973. 4 years later, the concept was independently rediscovered and published publicly, which leaves us with RSA. We all use RSA. It is still a key factor in TLS. It is becoming less popular because of performance and other issues, but it is still widely used. As you can see here, the math behind RSA is actually fairly simple. To encrypt, you simply take a message as a binary number, raise it to a certain value, called E, and then modulo N, where N is the product of two secret prime numbers. The values for E and N are both part of the public key. They're public knowledge. But without knowing what two prime numbers made up N, there is no way to complete the decrypt operation. To make a system secure, the two prime numbers in play have to be quite large. Today, it's considered an N of less than 2048 bits is insecure. ECC, on the other hand, is just a little bit more complex. While ECC, or elliptic curve cryptography, was first developed in 1985, it's only in the last few years that it's been in widespread use. This is largely due to various patent issues. It's a complex topic. I'm not going to get into it. I will say, though, that it has caused some debates that have lasted for years. The public Red Hat threads on the topic are absolutely fantastic. There are implementations, though, such as Curve 25519, that are completely unencumbered. The code is in the public domain. There are no patents. There are no trademarks. No nothing. ECC has some major advantages over RSA. The keys are smaller at the 128-bit security level. ECC keys are around 256 bits in length. RSA at that same security level is 3072 bits. ECC is much faster than RSA, which eliminates a lot of the scalability issues that come with it. Key generation is also much simpler. You don't need these huge prime numbers. It is basically a random number. There is no with certain curves, there is no structure to it whatsoever. It is literally a random number, and you're done. Hashing functions, I'm going to tear through this one pretty quickly because I'm running behind schedule. Where a block cipher scrambles data in such a way that it can be reversed if you know a certain secret, hash functions are one-way operations. There is no efficient way of getting back to the input value, and efficient being defined as anything less than brute force. MD5, still widely used. Thankfully, it's being phased out. It is insecure. It is completely broken. MD5 should not be used. SHA-1 was designed by the NSA to replace MD5. It's also broken. SHA-2, which was also designed by the NSA, this time to replace SHA-1, has actually held up fairly well. It has multiple output sizes. SHA-2 is also known as SHA-256, SHA-384, and SHA-512, which is about to get confusing, because we now have SHA-3, which also has output of 256, 384, and 512 bits. The big difference between SHA-2 and SHA-3 is SHA-3 is a completely different type of structure. It was selected from a contest. It was not designed by the NSA. The security level of SHA-3 and SHA-2 is roughly equivalent at this point. I also want to give a mention to Blake 2B. The best researched candidate for the SHA-3 competition was Blake, after another candidate won, the Blake team came back and built Blake 2. It is faster than MD5 and as secure as SHA-3 with variable output. So if you're retrofitting a system that uses MD5, it is a great option. Password storage, PBKDF2, bcrypt, scrypt. Password stored with anything else, it's wrong. Plain and simple. PBKDF2 is common, it's easy to implement, but it doesn't use enough memory. The big thing to take away from this one is you've got to find a balance with this stuff, because if you go something like scrypt with the top parameters, it will bring your servers to an absolute crawl. So finding the balance on how to protect passwords is tricky. I'm sure all of you know speed kills when it comes to password hashing. A friend of mine runs a company that they build password cracking rigs. If you look at this chart, this is based off of a single GPU system that he recently built. If you note the scale, millions per second. For something like MD5, it is modern GPUs can just absolutely destroy it. This is another one of his systems. 8 GPUs, 1 box. And they cluster these things together for certain unnamed clients that want to crack anything. Put enough of these together, it's pretty effective. Validating data. There are various signature algorithms, DSA, ECDSA, ECDSA, and others. These are all built on public key crypto. They allow you to verify that a message is from somebody holding a specific private key. While widely used, DSA must be used with extreme care. It relies on a good random number generator. If the RNG fails, it can expose the private key. On the symmetric side, there are MACs, or message authentication codes. These are effectively secret key signatures. If you know the secret key, you can compute the MAC and verify that the data has been unaltered. When implementing this, you want to use an HMAC, which is a hash-based MAC, using a strong hash function. One other thing that's important to note here, something that should always be remembered, never reuse your encryption keys. If you are encrypting and generating a MAC from the same piece of data, you use different keys. If you use the same key, you can reveal information which could allow both of them to be broken. Right, skipping ahead here. An example of the DSA issue, this bit Sony, in 2013, it bit the Bitcoin community fairly hard because of an issue with Bitcoin wallets that had been generated off of Android devices because the random number generator wasn't properly seeded. That revealed patterns in the signatures. Next thing you know, somebody has the private key. And in the Bitcoin world, if somebody has your private key, they have your money, which is exactly what happened. I could spend an hour on this one just by itself. Random number generators are a fascinating topic and something that you've got to be very, very careful with. The advice I'm going to give you at this point is simply use the operating system provided random number generator. Don't use user-land generators, and for the love of God, don't try to roll your own. If you're using some Nix variant, you want to use dev urandom. Not random, urandom. If you're using Windows, crypt gen random. If you're using anything else, you're doing it wrong. If you want to learn more, buy this book. This is the single best piece of material available today on practical, applied cryptography. There's a lot of stuff out there that goes deep into theory, that goes deep into the math. For most people, you don't need to know that. You just need to know how to apply it. That's one of the things I really like about this book. There are projects such as the Underhanded Crypto Contest that study different ways that intentional flaws can be introduced to understand their impact. If you want to understand how systems are affected by the flaws that can be introduced, either intentionally or otherwise. The results being produced by this contest are absolutely fantastic. Some great material there. And with that, everybody, thank you so much. I think I nailed the time perfectly. Thanks.